I'm here. The claim that I'm responding to is that the enhanced interrogation technique is an effective means of gaining valuable information. The three secondary claims that my opponent used was that EIT meets established legal standards for interrogation and is therefore not illegal. EIT is effective, and EIT is necessary. On the first claim that it meets established legal standards for interrogation is therefore not illegal. He uses a definition. He says that it is not illegal because it is not torture, using a definition that states that inhumane treatment is that torture is inhumane treatment including biological experiments willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health. He states that most procedures that enhanced interrogation techniques use do not cause permanent damage and therefore are not under this criteria. However, I don't see how injury can be defined by whether it is permanent or not. According to Random House Webster's American Dictionary, to injure someone is to cause harm or to threaten unjustly. I'm not sure what part of that indicates that it's permanent. I can break my arm and it will heal, but it's still an injury nonetheless. From the same site, I got a definition from Part 1, Article 1, and the U.S. Reservation of the UN Convention Against Torture that says that the term torture means any act in which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on the person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession. And I don't think it can be said that any of the means that the enhanced interrogation techniques use do not, at the very least, cause mental distress, if not physical. He also stated that in waterboarding, or as it says, to be strapped down, put cellophane over your face and water poured on you. The procedure for that is if you cry out, they will stop. But I don't really understand how it would be easy to cry out if you're having problems breathing altogether. He also states that other tortures include standing in one place for a period of time, and that since for hours on end, and since we're used to this in Disneyland lines, it can't be that bad. I admit I've stood in many hours, waiting for Space Mountain at Disneyland, but the difference there is that there's movement, there's music, there's atmosphere, things to entertain you, and at the very least, I don't usually go to Disneyland alone, and so there are usually friends with me to keep me entertained. These are luxuries that usually the people do not have in this situation. Second claim is that EIT is effective. He used a quote that says that in a June 3rd, 2005 report says that one of the gains to detaining the additional terrorists has been thwarting of a number of al-Qaeda operations in the United States and overseas. This report is from the CIA itself. So I would say that, yeah, they probably would say that what they're doing is right. He also mentions that there were 2 attacks that were prevented from the Statue of Liberty and the Brooklyn Bridge. I could not find any sources, either in the sources I was given from my opponent or in my own research, that said that the theoretical attacks on the Statue of Liberty or the Brooklyn Bridge were prevented by interrogation, but rather that it was through an arrest of a woman that was part of al-Qaeda who owned a list of landmarks in the United States that prevented these possible attacks. It's hard to say that EIT can have caused more prevention or whether they just caused false claims or not, since these attacks were never executed. Whether that was a prevention or whether it was not going to happen is hard to say. The third claim is that EIT is necessary. It's hard for me to go against this claim since there was no real authoritative sources used by my opponent. One thing he says is that the Army Handbook says that to treat people with loving, caring, and then this shouldn't be the case because they're terrorists. Because they're terrorists, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily a reason not to treat them as humans. He also says that no terrorist is willing to give up any incriminating information. That's one of our amendment rights. We don't need to incriminate ourselves. And terrorists or not, I think that they are humans and that some decency and rights should be extended to them. So, in conclusion, I hope that you'll agree that the enhancement interrogation techniques are neither an effective nor a moral way of gaining valuable information. Thank you. You don't like dog ears, right?
No, I do not, thank you. Well, I like my dog's ears, but not on the papers, no.
Okay. Sure.
All right, the structural issues are fine. The question about torture is raised on the first point, and you basically get into a definitional issue, and there ought to be an explanation about why the definitional criteria you come up with are better than the ones that the advocate presented. You've got that analogy of breaking the arms, but I'm not exactly sure that that would even fit the criteria that the advocate presented on that particular point. And the notion that it's going to be mentally distressful, by that definition, it's torture if you arrest somebody because they suddenly realize they're going to be in prison, or at least they're going to be detained. I think that that's a little bit extreme definition on the other end, so I think you're going to have to rely on some more practical application of these concepts. On the waterboarding, you have an okay challenge. It's mostly just sort of a little bit of analysis and trying to get in a dig at the point. I don't know that there's much proof on this, and I think you'd be better off if you found some information that suggested that the waterboarding is not particularly effective, or that the use that it was employed in didn't get us any particular results. I think that would be stronger rather than just the snarky comment that you can't really shout out if your face is covered with water and plastic. On the second point, the labeling is okay. The challenge basically on the evidence is, well, the CIA says it works and they're the ones doing it, so we can't trust them. You know, if you had some other grounds to compare, but if I've got one source of evidence and that's the only information I have, and I had to make a judgment about this, it's better than judging in the dark. If you had any information on the other side, I think that would strengthen that particular position. And on the last point, when you're talking about rights, there is no explanation about why the Fifth Amendment would apply to people in these particular contexts. Now, there are questions, for instance, about where somebody is arrested and that sort of thing. So, for instance, the guy in New York City here, he was arrested in the United States. Maybe there are legal issues, constitutional issues that have to be applied there, but extending Fifth Amendment rights to somebody, for instance, who's taken on a battlefield in Afghanistan, I think that that's not quite the same sort of thing, and under rules of war would never have applied in that situation. So you have to have some explanation that's a little bit more than, well, we ought to be extending these people human rights. I just think that's a little underdeveloped there. All right, thank you.